so
Yeah.
it doesn't get as cold as Scotland would.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what I liked is, coming from Australia, I try to go to Europe. Well, surprisingly, I go to Europe at the end of the year in December-ish. Number one, because it's hot here, and I try to escape the hot, um, and to get over there. But it's cold over there. But it's really quite nice. But we try to do one country well rather than like do little bits and pieces. So we did Scotland for 3 weeks this time, and my next one is going to be Ireland. So I might
Nice.
hit you up for some tips.
Yes, you'll have to. Please do. Please do.
Yeah. And I think yeah, and I like it when I've discovered that when I go to big cities now, I just like to be in the regional areas, not the big cities. So yeah,
Mm, yeah, no, I know the feeling. I
yeah,
like that idea of doing one area well as well. Okay, so I'm
yes,
just aware of the time, and I
yes,
know the recording has started now. So what
yes,
I might do is I might do a little spiel to
yes,
sort of kick off, and being mindful that there will be people watching back the recording, and then
yes,
it's going to be it's very informal. So there's going to be no sort of problem with addressing whatever it is that you want to address or not, or just I've got material just in case, and there's plenty of options for us here today. So yeah, well, I'll just kick off formally, and then yeah, well, first of all, let
yes,
me check. Am I pronouncing your name properly with Giselle? Is that correct?
yes, yep,
Okay, perfect. Good. Just wanna check. Okay, excellent. Well, so yeah, like I've mentioned, I'll kick off with an acknowledgement of country, and particularly the Turrbal and the Yugara people whose lands I am on currently in inner North Brisbane, but extending that acknowledgement to the lands where you are in real time today, Giselle, and also, of course, to anybody watching back in the future. And of course, at QET, certainly, which is where I'm based, we pay respects to elders, lores, customs, and creation spirits of the Turrbal and Yugara people in particular, and recognise that these lands have always been places of teaching, research, and learning. And QUT acknowledges the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QUT community. And I'd also like to extend my particular respects to elders past, present, and emerging, including any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander peoples who might be here in our wonderful module taking part and watching back this unit,
yeah,
this recording. So yeah, the format, like I said, and first up we've had a welcome everybody again. Past, present, future watching this. It's always funny with the
yeah.
recording and speaking to the recording and being aware of that. But yeah, so this is our week 3 live session where it's a question and answer format. And I do have we have a forum, of course, a discussion thread on Canvas, which was open for questions if anybody had them. No questions have come in there, but that's absolutely fine. That's no problem. I know there have been other sort of questions and themes and things that have come up over the last 3 weeks as we've been engaging there. So that's absolutely fine. So what I was thinking is we can check first of all if anybody here has questions. I can see we've had Nimi is joining us now as well. So and if there's any questions or any topics or themes or anything that you would like to address, we can take note of that now, and yeah, then plan how we want to move forward with the rest of the session. So I see Nimi said that they don't have any questions, so that's absolutely fine. That's no problem. And how about yourself, Giselle? Were you thinking in particular of anything you'd like to have a chat about today?
I don't have any particular questions, but I guess as we kind of unfold, I might have some. I think,
Yeah.
as we go along, I kind of like try to there's bits and pieces, but sometimes as I'm moving along, I think, oh, I've got a question, and then it gets answered a little bit further down the track or whatever, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't need to ask that anymore. So yeah, so I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
yeah, I'm happy just to see how it unfolds, and if I've got any questions, ask along the way if that's okay.
That sounds absolutely fine. And likewise, Nimi, if you have any questions, please feel absolutely free to open your mic anytime and interrupt. I'm well able to talk away, but whether it's what you want to hear or not, it's another question. So always happy to be directed. So no concerns about you opening the mic anytime and doing that. Or indeed
Mm.
prompting in the discussion forums, by the way. Okay, so I was thinking let's have a little look at what we looked at this week in our topic. So I'm just going to open here. I'll have it in front of me here, and I will share the screen, but I know you know what it looks like. But still, it's nice to kind of just have something to look at, I think.
Mhm.
And so here we go. Share this. Let's have a look at. Okay, this is going to be where I illustrate my capabilities are not where I thought they would be. Perhaps as I look at everything that's updated, the minute that I decide I'm going to share something and everything looks different than what I looked at last time. That's okay. Okay, I can see this is going to change all the settings on my screen. So I'm not going to share that, but
Mhm.
it was just going to be a share of the canvas, but that's fine. So this week we looked at data and citizenship, right? And about this, the managing data and information. And I think this is sort of like depending on what perspective you're coming from, this can be the kind of the crunchy end of the tricky end of the digital tool spectrum if you are not particularly comfortable with digital tools or platforms that are quite specialized and that are quite oriented towards the professional usage end of things. And I think depending again on your disciplinary background and what methods that you use, typically your comfort level with big data sets mightn't be the same as everybody else's, and that's absolutely fine. So I think this week was an interesting one to kind of lots of information there, work through what's there. We tried to touch on loads of things and give you options and springboards to jump off of, and the idea being that at the very minimum you have options to kind of start somewhere and then decide whether you wanted to take that further or not, and that you at least had a baseline awareness of what researchers that you're likely to be working with, if you're working in academia or in a sphere using your research skills, then you'll probably be working with other people who are at least aware of these tools or using these tools themselves. And so that's the angle that we take. That's the reason why it's well worth having this baseline understanding. And I think, as when you're going through your, PhD in my case, but obviously it's, if you're doing your higher degree by research or if you're working in the sphere of researchers, we can all really get into our own little silos and working in our own field only or just on our own project. And we don't realize that when we raise our heads and go out into the world, once we've completed our research degree or completed the project that we're working on in particular, it's like this it's like another world when we look at what other researchers do. And I think, again, the idea with this material was let's at least know what countries exist in the rest of the world so that when we do go out there, we at least can start to orientate ourselves and understand who sits where and what's happening where. So that was the idea of the material for this week. I feel like a lot of it, some of it will be familiar. If you've gone through the ethics process at all, then certainly the some of the ethical questions will be familiar to you already. And this is an area that's actually always changing. Like year to year, they're often updating. Like your ethics committees in universities will be constantly, revising what it is that you need to be including in your applications, and yeah, in line with the way the data changes all the time. Giselle, I can see you have your hand up there.
Yeah, just picking up on the comment that you made just a minute ago about the ethics. I've just finished doing my ethics application, and I wish I
Yeah.
had done this before that because I think that would have really helped me. I really struggled not knowing, not coming from that background myself. So it was a
Mm,
chore to get through that section, even though looking at the level of detail that I've got with what we're looking at now, um,
mm,
it feels like the application was easy in comparison, but I just wish I had certainly something
yeah.
that's good. You have to be mindful of. You don't come from that background.
Yeah. It's tricky, isn't it? Like, and I think, but then sometimes I wonder because I've gone through the ethics process a few different times on a couple of different projects for different things, and every time I've done it, it's always been at QUT, by the way, so the same institution, but with different faculties and things. And it is always potentially, it's always like, it's not always been the same level of difficulty, but you never know what's going to come up. It is because the field changes all the time, and there's always different things that are picked up, and what might get through at one point might not at another point. So um yeah, I think it's interesting. I know it's definitely sometimes it's a bit of a baptism of fire, but you've gone through it, so that's pretty awesome. Like you've gotten a lot from that process just by having gone
Yeah,
through. I think that
yeah, I
hopefully
really
will.
did. It certainly did
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. And it's a funny thing as well. Sometimes it's not like, certainly when I think about ethics, when I started to think about ethics, I was like, well, I'm not an unethical person. I'm not going to have problems here. But it's obviously not that. There's a huge other layers of stuff that goes on around it. So it's interesting to think about. And again, I think another part of the ethics picture is that if you're working in research outside of a university environment and you don't have to go through that process, then that's quite eye-opening in itself, because you also sort of start to ask yourself, well, if you're working in a university environment, how can we compete with commercial providers of research information and research products if there is this obligation to go through this ethical process, and they don't have to go through that, and then the restrictions that are upon us. So that's a whole other interesting angle to think about. And when you think about who you want to be as a researcher and where you want to work, and the environments that you're going to be in and who you'll be working with, that's all part of it. And different countries have really, really different processes as well about what they think is okay and stuff. Oh, yeah, I noticed Nimi's mentioned that they've gone through ethics in two countries. Yeah, the cultural perspective. Yes, I agree. Yeah, the cultural perspectives of the countries will be very different, particularly around what they think about privacy often, and data sharing. The perspectives that are around that, and also I think how where a country might sit in terms of its regulation around those kind of things as well, and also how much of a concern that is to a government at a given time as well. That can be part of it too. So yeah, I think it's times like that I really realize, like I found myself reflecting more on the role of universities in society more broadly when I've sort of gone through those processes within the university, because I suppose that is what we're doing in the university, in the ethical application process. We are looking at a much bigger picture. We're not just thinking of it from a commercial perspective. We're thinking of it, well, what is the bigger societal impact of that? Um, so I say we've had another friend join us, so that's great. Um, so yeah, so there's a few different angles on the ethical side of things, and how that impinges on data storage and data collection, in particular. So I think that's interesting. Another thing that came up as well in the material this week was around open access information and data, and thinking about starting to foreshadow. We'll look at that even more again next week, but thinking about how you might want to be sharing the data that you collect in the future, if that's an option for you, and how can you set that up in advance to kind of make the fruits of what you've collected accessible to future generations of researchers, or open and transparent for scrutiny, if that may be the case, or repurposing and reuse. So that's sort of a little bit more on that next week, but again, there's aspects of that was touched on this week, and that was under the sort of the sharing data um, angle. And yeah, a couple like we've had the two main discussions this week as well, and of course the data analyst analysis activity. So I noticed that not too many people have popped um, their visualizations on the Padlet, but that's okay. There's still plenty of time to do that. Again, we're never late on this course to do anything. You're just doing it in your own time, or you're engaging with the aspects that are most relevant to you, and that is all absolutely fine, whatever way that works. Giselle, I can see your hand is raised now. Is that a new one, I'm wondering, or is that from the last time?
It
If
is
it's
a new one, and I'm
okay,
not sure if
perfect.
this is it's
Yeah,
not,
go
I'm not sure if now's the place. I don't want to hog the session, but just in
hog
relation
away.
to that, the sharing, I did send a
Yeah,
message. I really struggled to join that. And I still haven't. I downloaded the data sets. I was able to do that. I was able to get onto oh,
yeah.
what's it called? I've lost it now.
Yes, I've
Um,
forgotten. So open refine, right? That was
Yes,
I
Open
couldn't.
Refine. I
That was
got
you,
into
Giselle.
there,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
could
yeah.
not. Yeah, I couldn't get to the bit, and
Okay,
went to the troubleshooting. I just couldn't get to the bit where I could
okay,
create the project. It didn't that option, the tab didn't come up for me, and it
okay.
seems I wasn't alone. There was when I went to the troubleshooting section and I did it. Other people had
Yeah,
similar experiences over the time. I tried to follow their prompts to make it work.
yeah,
3 hours later, I was still going. So I got a bit
yeah,
frustrated and annoyed, and I left it,
yeah, yeah.
thinking I would
That's
talk about
fine.
it
Yeah,
today.
yeah,
If anybody had any tips or tricks, and I just don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm following it
yeah,
like step by step, and I can see what I need to do, but I
yeah.
just can't get there.
Yeah, okay. No problem. We'll definitely talk about that. That's definitely on the agenda to talk about. That's fine. Was there anybody else here who had issues with Open Refine, or if you haven't had a chance yet to go through it, that's absolutely fine as well. Um, okay, so I'm not seeing any immediate, hands up on that, but that could be for loads of reasons, like I said. So, first of all, Giselle, it's absolutely fine that that's happened. Like, I don't mean it's fine, it's not, it's annoying, and it's not what you want to happen, but I suppose I don't know what the answer to that is either, because this is where, depending on what your system is, the reasons for it could be so different. If it's not something that you want to pursue further, if you spent 3 hours on it already, it sounds to me like you've already more than given it your shot of trying to make it work. If it's not something that you think you're going to want or need to pursue further, then I would say don't hesitate to think to yourself, you know what, don't know why that didn't work, not ideal, but let's move on and look at other tools that might be more of help to you, and invest that time and energy into what will be helpful for you. That would be one approach, I would say. The other one is yeah, I mean, I think that's the main thing. Otherwise you can keep going back, but ultimately I think it's less important that we figure out what exactly is not working for you. This would be my perspective on it, and you feel free to disagree, obviously. And I think it's more about the fact that this is something very different and new for you that you've tried to work out and engage with. You've gone to the support forums. You can see that it's some kind of a known issue. And your next step would be, well, how do we figure out when this happens in life in general with our technical tools? Where do we go as researchers when we have these problems? Um, so that those would be the two sort of things I'd say. Look, we can talk about where could we go from here in a sort of a theoretical way, um, and see how we could apply that to other tools that you might want to use yourself. Or you could say, look, you know what, I'd never want to talk about it again, I'm over it. Have you a preference for how you'd like to chat about that, Giselle?
I feel like I've invested a fair bit of time in it now, and I want to see the end of it, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like, even going through just the tutorials and things like that, it did look like a really good
yeah,
forum for me to be able to
perfect.
platform for me to be able to do some of that data cleaning stuff, and I,
Yes,
I feel like I'm familiar with it now.
yeah,
And I also think it's probably it seems like it's just like one little thing that I'm not doing or should be doing,
yeah,
because I feel like I'm really, really close to getting that done. So I was tired when I came out at the end of my 3 hours.
yeah,
But I've kind of set it as a bit of a challenge now. So I may go back to it
yeah,
over the next
yeah,
few days when I've got some time, and see if
yeah,
there's anything that I can kind of
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
do.
Because I just have it set up and I haven't used it on my system in a long time, so I don't even remember the steps that I went through to set it up. It's one of those things. But once it's set up, you just kind of run it when you need it, and that's it, which means that I'm not going to be in a great position to kind of offer, very specific
Yeah.
help on it. But I think anywhere, like whenever I have problems with any sort of that data wrangling stuff, I always find there are like there's a community that's the and I'm forgetting of it now, but forgetting the name of it now, but it'll come into my head in a minute. Where they run this they run sessions. It's like an open community, and they run these. Let me just think. No, it's escaping me now. And every year Research Bazaar. Have you heard of them? The ResBaz, they're called.
No,
So
no.
I'll share links and everything about this
Yeah.
afterwards. But so because I don't come from a background of heavy data wrangling myself at all, and all of these tools were completely new to me a couple of years back when I started my PhD, and my PhD is mainly, although not entirely, qualitative based. So I'm not dealing with big data sets, but I have on other projects. So I'm self-taught, basically, is the short
Mm,
reply, and I had to figure all that out as well. But what I did was there's this group of there are people who do this every day, but they're in universities all around Australia, and they have this online sort of community, but they're sort of quiet in between they've annual catch-ups, and they call it the Research Bazaar is what they call it. And basically it's like an unconference, where people just rock up and talk about whatever areas that they're working on in particular, but they're so open to newcomers who just turn up and are trying to get to grips with what's going on. And by newcomers, it is like HDR students often, or people working in the research space who want to know how to use these tools at a professional level. And because there isn't really training, because we're at that level where we've gotten this far in our lives without formal training, and not a whole lot of formal training exists around this. So the community is fantastic. And so while that you might not get your answer straight away on that, when I send you some links, you might find that digging in, you'll find some ways that you can access other types of forums that you can post for answers, where you might get responses more quickly because they are Australian based. There's a fairly active Queensland group as well, for example, that you can sort of drop into. And when you say what university you're at, there'll be someone else at your university, for
yeah.
example, who will connect with that. And my reasoning behind suggesting all of this is, I think it's about building a community for yourself as well. Like whatever areas you think you might be, whatever tools you think you might be using, like try and find communities that are using that, because it will make such a big difference. And because you will encounter problems consistently
Mm,
throughout
yeah.
your use of these tools. And I know that might sound a bit defeatist, but it's not. I really think at the level that we work with the tools that we will be working with, we will have these issues. And it's not like a commercial tool where there's a good strong like technical support that you might have to pay for, like, but that even exists. It's not even there because it's open source, this particular tool. And a lot of the tools that we use as researchers might be, and probably will be, if we're in universities. So yeah,
Mm.
I think.
I did find the forum that was on there, it was linked to there. I think it was called GitHub or
Yes,
something
that's
like
right.
that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that was actually really helpful. Like they had
Yeah,
lots of good tips and tricks, and I felt like I was getting so close to getting the problem solved.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, ended up just like abandoning ship and try. I think I will go back and try again because I did feel like there was going to be a resolution.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
like I said, just through reading that forum, it seemed like okay, there was a lot of different ideas and pathways to take. So I didn't
yeah,
try them all, but I will go back and try them all.
yeah,
It I think it seems to me maybe it's just a setting on my computer because that was one of the resolutions was there was a setting that I had to open up something and I was kind of
yeah.
going through trying to find it and
For
yeah,
sure
so
it
I
is.
may
Yeah,
just do
yeah.
that.
As in, like, because I even find when if I don't use um either Open Refine or any of the open tools in that sphere, because there's so many of them that you don't even know exist until you get in there and poke around in GitHub, for example. Um, like anything related to our studio as well is another one that I sort of dip in and out of every now and then. And again, I find it's working great, and then I update my computer and it's gone. It's just not working. And I have to then, and this is part of what we need to do, is nearly we have to be our own like tech support in some way with these tools. Now, the downside of that is it's exhausting. And you have to,
Yeah.
like, I find I have to really manage myself and my time and how I'm going to approach figuring out what is gone wrong. And because you really feel like you are just that little step away. But I guess all I can offer at this point is just I'm thrilled to hear you think you want to go back and give it more of a go because you feel like you're close, because that's what it is about. Like, it is just about getting in there. Um,
Yeah.
and
I
obviously
think
down,
I think for
yeah.
me, yeah, I think for me too, this PhD journey is about, I just had to keep kind of doing my self-talk. This is about learning,
Yes,
and learning new skills
yeah,
and learning new opportunities. And I thought, you know what, this is just part of that. And it's not easy, but I'm going to
yeah,
make it a bit of a challenge and see if I can get to the end rather than giving up. So I'll
yeah,
keep
yeah,
going.
yeah.
And yeah, move it along from there.
Absolutely. Look, I think so. And if you do come to a point where you decide, I'm not giving up, but I've decided I'm going to spend my time elsewhere, I think that's okay
Mhm.
too, because you're going through the process, right? Like
Yeah.
you're engaging, and that's you
Yes.
learning. Like that's
Yes.
already gotten you further than a lot of people that already decide this is too hard. I'm not even going to go there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's and totally, I suppose what I really want to get across is normalize your experience, because I think
Yeah.
that it is and it's not just you, and it's not just because you're in your first year, and it's not just because of any of the reasons you might have in your head as to why it might be. It is because it's a hard thing, and like this becomes a feature of, I think, of our lives as researchers, and having to figure out for ourselves, where do we go from here, and not having that formal pathway, and with all the tools that we use. And yeah, and I think it sounds like you're doing awesome, actually. So yeah, good on you. And
Definitely getting there.
yeah, it's yeah, it's full on. And I think there's so much confidence that comes from that it's not that when you know that, okay, you might know the answer straight away, but you know that you can engage and figure it out. Yeah, there's power that comes with that. And I think that's probably one of the main things that I wanted to emphasize today, really, is that, and hopefully that's become really evident through the material in this module, that the competencies thing, it's really is about this much bigger picture, right, than just the digital tool and how to use one tool. It really is so much about mindset and about this like growth orientation and this learning approach, which we can hear sometimes and think, right, okay, yeah, but I think it's embodying that in the use of our tools. And also, but even bigger than that, it's about thinking about what are the practices and the routines that we have day to day that we can refine and introduce, like aspects of automation into. Like, just because we've always done it this way, is there a better way that we can do it? And just sort of think a little bit more about how we want to be and how we want to show up in the spaces that we show up in. I think is that, like, that's really what underpins the entire digital competencies idea, I think. And it's about that much bigger picture. And I think why I like that is, and I know I've alluded to this before, like tools will come and go, because they do, but when you have the larger capability set, you can evolve as well. And I think even with things like AI, and which we haven't really touched on at all in the unit so far, which is interesting that it's not sort of cropped up or anything, but I've no doubt that it will. We don't address it, you know, hugely in the material. The material is just that starting point, but absolutely happy to run with questions or anything in the discussion forums as we go through. And I have resources that to share as well around that in general. So if anybody watching has burning questions about AI, feel free to get in there and post those in the cafe or anywhere, any of the forums, even if it doesn't match the prompt, and happy to kind of share and engage with that. But I think with the competencies piece again, um, that's how we'll never be replaced as humans, right? Because if your skill, if your primary skill set revolves around the use of one or two types of tools in themselves, and that's it, you know where the features are, you know the buttons to click, you know how to make it perform in a certain way, and then that's the extent of your capabilities, then I think you are at risk of being replaceable, because that can be automated, right? That there will be people who are able to do that, and there will be people who are very specialized, and that's what they do every day, and work on these tools, and that's fine. But I think if you're someone who can span those different spheres, and you can understand how to approach something, and you understand the way that humans are using the tools, I think that's what we can bring to the table as researchers, and with the mindsets that we have and the skill sets that we have from our training. So yeah, absolutely. My recommendations with AI are, first up, I would say, find out if you're involved in teaching, um, that can be a good way to approach AI. So if you are working in education in any way, shape, or form, your students will already be using AI, and so then that means your institution will already have a policy in place, probably, very likely, about what's appropriate what's an appropriate way for AI to be used. So the first thing I would suggest would be to go to your institution and see what they're recommending, and the ways that they're recommending students use AI, and specifically generative AI tools. For example, ChatGPT is one type, and there's loads of different types. The other thing I would recommend is sign up for an AI tool and play around with it. So whether that's ChatGPT, or whether that's one of the many other ones that are out there, yeah, or if you're more interested in one of the visual generative tools, then jump in and have a look, because just sign up. It doesn't take anything, doesn't cost you anything, and have a play and see what it can do. And I think that will help normalize it a little bit for you, and also you'll realize what the limits of it are very quickly. I think you'll realize how awesome it is, but you'll also realize, okay, I can start to see where the limitations of this are, and I think that's quite nice. But again, I would say find an angle in, whether it's the teaching angle, or whether if it's you're more in the research space specifically. Something I've found is there are a lot of researchers who are writing and talking about using AI as part of their everyday working reality, and they're already doing that, and they're already talking about and exploring, how can we do this, what's a better way to use this. And as part of those conversations, they will mention different tools that are being used, and that's a great way, again, for you to sort of start to get in to the idea of what the capabilities of the space are. And yeah, so take your time with it. Like, if you haven't gone anywhere near AI yet, take your time, skirt around it, listen to some conversations that are already happening. Don't feel like you have to jump in and understand it, because again, I don't believe that people get left behind. When your time is right to figure out a technology, you'll figure it out, because you have your capabilities that will let you do that. But start with the contexts in which it is most useful to you, and understand that there are already structures around you that will help you ease in to any new technology. So whether that's, for example, with AI, what is your university saying about it? Different universities have different offerings, but have a look and see, what are they offering to students to understand. Like, are they offering taster sessions for lecturers and tutors or casual academic staff that maybe you could go along to? Have a look at your intranet in your university, whatever it is, look at the training options and see, like, because it's new for everyone. So this is kind of an exciting time to be looking at AI, to be starting to look at AI, because it just blew up right on it in everyone's face on the scene, in the higher education sector in the last sort of 6 months. But of course, these technologies have been around for an awful long time before this. And if you're familiar with the space, you've seen this coming a very long time. It's not new. It's nothing particularly revolutionary from what you've already, got your mind around. So there'll be, it's 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 never too late, and you're never behind, and you'll find your angle in, and just go slow. Figure out what you need to know, and you know when you can feel the blind panic coming at you, and I'm saying this for myself because I feel this as well, and you think, oh my God, the computers are taking over and this is it, it's not going to be something that we're going to survive, and I can feel the fear and the panic in myself quite often, right? And then I think, okay, Sarah, hang on, and I take a breath and I step back and I go away, and then I think, no, no, we're humans. And I find taking a historical perspective can really help, that when you look back and see that technologies, humans have been dealing with technologies always, and I'm not saying this isn't different. This is different in the speed at which it's coming at us. There's no question about that. But we adapt, and nothing's going to happen tomorrow or the day after that you need to worry about. So, take it where you need to take it, deal with it as it comes up, and try give yourself a bit of breathing space with it, because I think the least helpful approach, in my opinion, is when the fear sets in, or the panic. I think that's when you're least likely to be able to apply the skills that you already have to figure this out. So that's sort of my my general philosophy on approaching AI in particular. But like I said, I will definitely share those specific. I'll share a couple of resources, like I said, that I have been collecting myself, and I'll sort of angle them. Hopefully, there'll be something there, regardless of where you're coming at the question from. And if the time isn't right for you to explore it right now, that's fine. Just take what you need from it and leave the rest. Um, yeah, so that would be my sort of my main thing on AI. I just want to stop for a minute and take a breath and double check if there is any other questions or anything else that you'd like to kind of cover. We do have a couple of students here, so I won't name any names, but please feel free to open the mic if you do want to talk about anything in particular.
Can you hear me?
Hi there, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine. I just want to ask something a bit on critical thinking.
Yep.
I did that in my the first week and finished the model. I
Yes,
just
yeah.
like if we can have like just like a brief chat on it.
Hmm.
Because it was more of on the computer. It used to be good to have like just like your input on it.
Yeah. On the
Creative thinking. Yeah,
critical thinking. Okay, so let
yeah.
me I'm going to pull up the material in the module so that I know in particular what we're looking at. Okay, so is this around thinking critically about the tools that you use? Is that it in particular, or?
Yeah, yeah. In terms of your research, particularly carrying out your research, how to, you know, have
Think,
like a
yeah. So just double checking. So there is another eGrad module that's on critical thinking, but this is the eGrad module on digital competencies, right?
okay, okay, all right.
Yeah. Just double checking that's,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is so if I've misunderstood you, absolutely please tell me. But so there is the critical, like we have talked about in week one, thinking critically about using digital tools in your research. Is that what you're talking about still?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all yeah.
Perfect. Okay, just want to double check that I'm, yeah, getting the right angle, because you see, otherwise I start to talk down an avenue that's not what you were interested in, and I don't.
No, no, everything is relevant.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good.
Mm.
Um, so I think this is a really good, a really good angle on on what we're using. And to me, this has a couple of different pieces, right? So it's about not just going with the automatic tool that you think you should use if you have a choice, right? I'm assuming you have a choice. Or if there's a standard tool that you have to use for, I don't know, whether it's your reference manager or whether it's, let's go online and let's use social media, or if we're thinking about, which platforms do I want to build my profile on? LinkedIn, ResearchGate, academia.edu, doesn't matter. Okay, any of those I'm calling tools. Okay. But when we think critically, we're not just jumping on whatever tool we think we need to jump on. We're thinking, well, what is the purpose for me behind using this? And I think that's that critical thinking piece, that like, it's how does this fit with how I want to show up as a researcher in my career in the future, but also what can I do today to start acting like the type of researcher that I want to be in the future? What would that future version of me, which platforms are they on? Are they on all the platforms? Maybe they are. And then you have to think, well, what's the time commitment on that, right? Or maybe you want to just be a little bit more selective about it, for example. And I think when you're thinking critically, you're thinking about, again, just not the default option every time. And maybe you think critically and then you decide, you know what, I am going to do the default option, and that's okay. But you've given it some thought. You've been intentional about your choices. You've been deliberate about your decisions. And I think that's what that piece is when it comes to digital competencies. We're thinking about being selective and also just a bit thoughtful as well in our process. And I think the reason why that works really well with us as researchers or researchers in training or people working in the field of research is because we have these skills, right, as part of what we're doing, that allow us to look at things from different angles and that question and probe some of the assumptions around what we do. And we can absolutely bring this to the ways that we use digital tools as well. And I think that's what that really is about. And it can be so easy to think, right? I'm not sure, we're all based in different places, but I know that I'm someone of very early career academic myself, and the pressure is definitely on to share our publications, for example, or to share research outputs so that we gain impact and that we, are really coming across in a way that's seen to be having an effect. So, I'm just seeing some stuff. Oh, awesome. Look at that. Ola's just shared in the chat some information about generative AI. Brilliant. I'll make sure that goes out in the material as well, that comes through after the session. I've completely lost my train of thought. Sorry. Oh, that's right. That's right. The pressure that we feel, right, to share our stuff on social media or to be visible and present and impactful. And but what I try to do is, and so when I feel that pressure, I find myself, I want to jump on all the platforms and start sharing and figuring everything out. And I start thinking, right, I'm going to have to, make a plan, be every month, check in, share this, use this app to automate that, and it's so easy to go down that pathway. But I'm at the stage, for what I'm finding helpful at the moment is I'm not doing that. Actually, I've made a deliberate decision not to do that. That actually, do I need to be doing that really, or are people just telling me that I need to be doing that? What do I gain from that? And if I start to, like, is that going to happen overnight, for example? Am I just going to be able to, if I start blasting out social media posts, for example, is anyone going to care? Is that just going to annoy people? Like, what's the bigger impact of this? What's the impact on my well-being if I do that? And so just thinking it out a little bit more in relation to the reality of your life and who you are as a human, I think is is a way to approach that in a more critical way. And some of the assumptions that are underpinning what we're being told to do, right? So the assumption is we need to be everywhere online, promoting everything as researchers. But maybe we can question that we don't need to. Has that given you some interesting pointers, or is
Yeah,
that...
yeah. No, that's fine. Thank you so much.
I'd be interested to hear more about what's your perspective that you're coming at that from. Is it the social media angle?
No, 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 not the social media angle. It's just
Mm,
using tools
mm,
that can help you, and
yeah,
also some technologies too,
yeah,
that can help in research. Like you mentioned, the chat
mm,
GPT.
yes,
Yes,
yeah,
it has been good, but you also need to have like a critical kind of thinking so that you know exactly what to impute,
mm,
so that we can give you a good result. It's not because it's garbage in, garbage out. So you need
100%. Yeah,
to think properly to get the best out of the technology.
exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And I do think that idea of the garbage in, garbage out is really, I mean, that's it exactly. That, and I think that's again why that looking at competencies from a bigger picture than just how do you use one tool is so important, because um, we're using, like, all of these technologies exist in a context, right? And yeah, I think it's important to remember that, um, what if we think about what do we need the output to do for us? What do we need the tool to do for us? Really think about that. And just because you can use a tool doesn't mean that you should, right? So I think those are the things for me that's about that, as well as how do we use this tool to get the best results that we possibly can from it, right? So yes, definitely all of that as well. But I think the amazing thing about being in academia is there's a lot of us here thinking about this. Like, there are so many people out there talking about this already and thinking about this already. Find the people that resonate with you, and just listen in on that conversation for a while. And I think you will find that that's a really nice way to start to evolve your thinking. But the minute you start to feel fear or panic, to me, is when it's a sign to myself that maybe I need to look somewhere else for people who are talking about this a bit differently, because I guarantee you they exist. There's not just one way to look at this. Um, yeah. So I am a little bit I'm aware of the time now, and I don't want to go on. So I'm going to wrap up at this point. And as I do that, what I'll do is I'll just have a quick look ahead to what's coming up next week, in week 4. And if you have any other questions or thoughts, and you want to share them in the chat now, that's absolutely fine. Please feel very welcome to do that. And I can follow up with you afterwards. That's never a problem. So looking at week 4, we will be looking at creativity and innovation. And so here we're thinking about how can you communicate your research, right? How can you work with the massive spectrum of tools that are out there to share I'm using outputs because I know that can sound quite a way that not everybody likes to think about their research work, but that you can share what you're doing, and what it is that you're producing, with wider audiences, right? So whoever those audiences are, whether that's the population that you study, the research population that you study, or whether that's people who might be potential end users of what it is that you study, whether that's other academics, senior academics, or whether that's fellow PhDs, HDRs, or professionals, whoever your audiences are, we can start to think about that, and what might fit in how we can share with them. As always, there's actually 3 discussions next week, and I encourage you to jump in again, use it as a starting point, see what's helpful, and feel free to leave what's not. But please keep engaged. Let us know, post anywhere, anytime, with what's of interest to you, what you're engaging with. If you don't let us know, we don't know. And we do have very much a lot of material and discussions that we're happy to share, and exchanges we're happy to have, but we don't always know how to start those with you as a cohort. So we do wait for your prompts on that. I'd like to very warmly thank everyone here for showing up. I know that some of us have had some technical issues engaging with the webinar. I suspect, judging by a quick glance at some of the comments and seeing what's going on. So if you have had technical issues, I'm sorry to hear that, and the recording will be available for you. And again, please feel free to follow up at any point. Still very, very glad to have had you all here. And yeah, I'm going to open, can see that we've got an open mic if you have a question you'd like to ask. Anybody? No? Okay. In that case, I will formally close our Q&A session, but I will stay around for a few minutes if anybody does have any further points they'd like to raise. And again, thank you very much. Bye, everyone. Have a good week.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks very much for your engagement.
Yeah.
Thank you.